I love supercharging, but I wish there was a way to turn faster like I desperately want to turn the trajectory of my life around.
Well, now there is!
What?
Have a look at this!
What am I looking at? Hi there. Sorry it's been so long since my last video. Editing is a bitch. If you've been hanging around the Spyro speedrunning scene lately, you'll probably have been made aware that recently the long-awaited any % tool-assisted speedrun finally dropped, the first new one in 11 years, courtesy of Waffle Wizard 1 and Toasted Cat. I even had the honor to debut it at ESA Summer 2023. But what you might not know is that even more recently than that, a legend by the name of Mans went and dropped a 120% TAS. This TAS absolutely obliterates the RTA world record when adjusted to our timing methods. But surely just clean movement doesn't carry it that far, right? If you're astute, you might notice a similarity between these two speedruns. They both use the technique known as supercharge sharpturning. So what the hell is it? How is it that Spyro is turning so fast during a supercharge when, no matter how hard I try, I can only turn as fast as a 70-year-old in a Tesco car park? First, let's go over how it was found. Let's go back to 2016, way before I ever started speedrunning Spyro. Meet Nitrofski. This guy's a fucking legend. If you take a few seconds to stop staring at his glorious beard, you'll find he's the current Spyro 3 117% world record holder, and the mastermind behind the Spyro 3 any % and 117% TASes that took YouTube by storm a few years ago. He once had a plan to complete a Spyro 1 any % TAS of his own, but he wanted to be thorough about it. So thorough, in fact, that a lot of the time he spent working on it was just on the route. But it was during those route studies he happened to stumble upon something interesting. Here's what Nitrof himself has to say.
I was tassing Wizard Peak, testing routes, and was trying to optimize my workflow by using the D-pad to overwrite analog inputs. I was trying different analog values so I can make some precise turn. Then at one point, adding the D-pad input suddenly caused Spyro to turn amazingly quickly in the opposite direction. I remember even not realizing something odd happened until my brain caught up a few re-records later.
Let's break this down. When you're in the supercharged state, when you hold a very specific analog angle, either cardinal left or right, then press the opposing direction on the D-pad, for some reason, this causes an overflow in Spyro's steering direction, causing him to turn significantly quicker than he's supposed to. Depending on the analog range, you can even change how sharply he's steering. Combined with how supercharge makes you invincible, lets you charge through big enemies and destroy otherwise indestructible metal chests as well as making you blindingly fast, this is how TASes use supercharge to absolutely terrorize the game in the levels that have it. So here's another question for you. Will we ever see supercharged sharpturning be used in RTA runs? I doubt it, but it's not impossible. See, supercharged sharpturning is possible for a human to do, just not consistently. Holding the correct analog angles on your stick whilst trying to play the game properly at the same time is a lot to ask. But what if our controller held the proper angles for us? This opens up the classic modified controller debate. Would it be legitimate for a speedrunner to use low-level modifications on their controllers like notches or pieces of plastic that guide their inputs to the right place? AsumSaus spoke about this at length in regards to Super Smash Bros. Melee and said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, as long as the controller isn't making the inputs for you like a turbo controller would, if your controller has small modifications to guide you to the correct inputs, it could be seen as okay. What's the difference between putting a piece of plastic near your analog stick that stops it at the correct spot and using, say, your finger to stop it at the correct spot? Ultimately, it's still all your actions performing the inputs, right? So, is there any history of something like this happening in Spyro speedrunning? As far as I'm aware, no. There have been light controller modifications, such as removing the rumble motors to make the controller feel lighter, replacing and swapping the membranes for the face buttons so they're easier or clickier to press, Or in my case, this is my pride and joy. These plastic start, select, and analog buttons made specially for me by the wonderful HoneySonya. These feel so much nicer than the default rubbery ones that DualShocks usually come with, by the way. But I'm getting off track. As far as I'm aware, so far there's been no need for any controller modifications that specifically help with certain inputs. So how about another way? What if you used a keyboard, or better yet a fight stick type controller with the analog angles programmed to the press of a single button, making supercharged sharp turning accessible to pretty much anyone with ease? Well, it's bad news if you want to use that in a speedrun. As it stands, binding certain analog ranges to digital buttons is not legal for speedrun.com submissions of the game. And so I ask you, the humble viewer at home, do you think they should be? Do you think it's worth allowing moving away from the intended way to play the game on a DualShock to a keyboard with pre-programmed analog ranges in order to push the game further past its limits? It's an interesting question that I don't think there's a clear-cut answer to. So, reeling it back, that's where we stand with supercharged sharp turning. An amazing piece of speedrunning tech that right now doesn't see any use from real-time runners. But maybe, just maybe, in the distant future of 20XX, we'll be supercharged sharp turning around to our heart's content. Thanks for watching.